We are here on the last two chapters of the book of Revelation this week and next week, and it has been a long time for us getting here. We've been on this since June. Revelation is the longest book in the New Testament except the Gospels and Acts. It's been a long time to get here, and I'm glad we're here because it's about heaven. We finally got rid of the devil. Last couple of weeks we got him down. Jesus told us how he gets down in hell. He's punished in hell forever. We got rid of all the other evil things in earth, and now finally we get to talk about heaven. Well, Jesus has told us about heaven a few other times. Way back in chapter 4 and 5, we saw the picture of heaven, Jesus on the Lamb of God on the throne, surrounded by the four living creatures, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then all the apostles, the angels and archangels and all the people in heaven praising him, surrounding the throne, singing his glory and so forth. We've seen that in 4 and 5, 7, 9, and 14 and other chapters in Revelation. But here we get to the end. We don't have any of those horrible things to worry about anymore, and I'm so glad we're done with them. It's been a difficult month or so dealing with all that nasty stuff. But now we get to think about heaven, and Jesus will show us some wonderful things about heaven that he thinks we need to know about. And remember, the whole book of Revelation is from Jesus because he thinks we need to know these things. Okay? Now, there's a difference between what Jesus thinks we need to know and what we think we want to know about heaven. What we think we want to know about heaven are the kinds of questions that people ask pastors, and sometimes they're questions that, when pastors hear them, we go, okay, because the kinds of questions that people ask, Pastor, I'd like to know this, are questions that I'm not sure how to answer, real solid answers to sometimes. And I feel like that kind of thing, okay? Like, for instance, really it's because there just isn't a direct Bible passage where I can pull out the Bible and say, see that passage right there? There's your answer, okay? Like, for instance, one of the questions is, will we all wear white robes and play harps in heaven? Well, that was Joanne chuckling there. Joanne hopes not, but let me say this, it's because harps were really the only musical instrument that John knew of. The organ had not been invented yet when John the Apostle was writing the book of Revelation. So Joanne is hopeful that by the time she gets to heaven, they will have organs.
She wants a harp for Christmas.
Okay. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but harps were the only things that John really knew of as musical instruments. Okay. Me, personally, I think around the throne of God is a heavenly band, and I personally think it's a bluegrass band. So, but that's beside the point. I don't know whether we'll be stuck playing harps or what they will be. White robes, the whole point with white robes is that they're clean and they're white, and they're symbols of being clean in heaven. It's not that there's no color to them, but they're symbols of being clean. The point of the whiteness is that there's no sin, there's no filth, there's no nastiness in heaven. Okay? It's like, I said months ago, walking into like walking into your grandma's house, and the grandma says, wipe your feet off before you walk into my clean kitchen. Well, you wear these white robes because Jesus has cleaned us off. He's washed us clean from our sins. His death on the cross means there's no sin in heaven. So you walk in and look at this, okay? It doesn't look, does it? It doesn't look like I've been walking through a manure pile to get here. And that's what it'll look like in heaven. Like you haven't been walking through the mud or the dirt or the manure pile or whatever it is that has been left on earth, the dirt and the nastiness, nothing nasty in heaven. Okay? And if you have been walking through it, you get clean before you get here. Jesus gives you a new robe, a new thing, a new cleanliness. Okay? It's all forgiven before you get in there. That's what the whole white robe point of it is. Not that there's no color, but that you're clean. Okay, so that's a good thing. Sometimes people ask me, Will we recognize people when we're in heaven? Will we recognize our loved ones when we're in heaven? It's like, well, I think so. You know, we'll recognize that there are people there. That's what, you know, John sees these big choirs of saints and other people who have died. So there are people in heaven. Will we recognize them? And I have to say, there's really only one person who has risen from the dead into eternal resurrection, and that's Jesus. So we really only have, you know, so it's not like we have a large pool of evidence to go on. We just have Jesus, okay? And yet, the Bible says Jesus is the first one of many, the first of the resurrection. So we ought to be able to draw the conclusion that there will be a lot like Jesus. If we can look at what happened when Jesus rose from the dead, then we should be able to say, well, this is the first of many, and a lot of us would be like that. So when Jesus rose from the dead, what happened? He had a new and glorious body. He was able to do some things he wasn't able to do before, apparently, like suddenly pop in and pop out of rooms where the doors and windows were locked. Suddenly appeared as disciples. In fact, the disciples thought he was a ghost. He said, all right, I'll prove it to you. You got anything to eat? And they had a fish sandwich, so he ate that. That's in one of the Gospels. Okay, so we have physical bodies. So we conclude, the Bible concludes, that we'll have physical bodies in the resurrection that will be recognized. The disciples recognized that it was Jesus, scars and all. He put out his hands and said, look, here's the scars. So in the resurrection, we'll have physical bodies, scars and all. Now, Jesus was only 33 years old when he died, so I don't know what that's going to say about wrinkles, but scars and all, he was resurrected. Okay? They recognized him, but it was a new and glorious body, and it was able to do some other things. Will we be able to recognize people that we used to know when they were alive on earth? Probably, if they're believers and have died in heaven. I guess we could. But then there's this one that sometimes people ask, or that I hear them say to other people. When you die, you become an angel. And that's the one where I go, okay. And I always say, I've said for a long time, you know, when you die, you don't become an angel. When you die, you don't become a hippopotamus either, or an anteater. When you die and are raised in the resurrection, you're still a human being. You're just a resurrected, a glorious human being. You don't become an angel, you don't become a hippopotamus, you don't become an anteater. A person who thinks that if you become some other creature after you die is not a Christian, that's a Hindu. Right? That's just the way it is. In the resurrection, we are who we are. We're still human beings. We're just resurrected human beings. Jesus died as a human person on the cross. When he rose from the dead, he was the human Son of God in his physical body. He was not an angel. He was also the Son of God, but in his human physical body, he was a human being. And there's every indication in the Bible that when we rise from the dead, in our glorified, resurrected bodies, we will also be human beings. That's the distinction. And there's angels and there's people who rose from and are in heaven in the book of Revelation. There aren't people who used to be people and are now hippos in heaven. It just doesn't work that way. Or angels either. So there are some things that we want to know, but then Jesus says, look folks, there are some things you need to know about heaven. That Jesus knows we need to know because we don't think to ask them, and yet they're pretty important. They're important because there are some other folks in the world, there's some religions in the world, there's some thoughts out there that float around that kind of get us messed up. And Jesus says, no, you need to know these things in order to set the record straight. So particularly this morning and next week, there's three things. Number one, heaven is a solid place. In the resurrection, it'll be a solid place. Number two, it'll be a glorious place. And number three, it'll be a, I'm going to use the word tasty place. Okay? I'm going to talk about the first two this morning and leave the last one for next week. I apologize for that, but like so much else in Revelation, it's because of the way the chapters are split up. So when we talk about heaven being a tasty place, we'll leave that for next week. That's a spoiler alert. Okay? Let's talk about heaven being a solid place and heaven being a glorious place today. Heaven is a solid place. Did you see all those words? Pearls, stones, precious stones, gate, walls. Heaven is a solid place. It's not a flaky kind of, floaty kind of, astral projection kind of, ethereal, otherworld place. It's not a place that some people say, oh, when we die, our spirits are just going to kind of float around and we'll be off in a wormhole-y kind of place or another New Agey type place. No, nothing like that. It's a solid new creation. St. Paul writes in Romans that the creation right now is groaning until the redemption of people is completed. This seems to indicate in Revelation that not only will our bodies undergo a resurrection, but the whole creation has a resurrection. And in the resurrection of the whole creation, everything will be renewed. Heaven and earth will be renewed, and the creation will be solid, and we'll be able to see it and feel it and touch it and even measure it. And how are we going to know that it's going to be solid? Because the angel has a yardstick, for heaven's sake. Okay? There's a heaven and an earth that come down from heaven, and the angel has a yardstick. Okay? It says he measures it with a measuring rod according to human measurement. How thick is the wall of the New Jerusalem? 144 cubits. What's a cubit? I know. 2 of them on a yardstick. So the wall of the new heaven and earth is 72 yards thick. You can measure it. The angel has the golden yardstick. Bible class we had. Well, what if you had a tape measure? No, it says he had a yardstick. Okay. So picture this. Picture this. John and the angel. John is writing, and the angel's measuring. 1, 2, 3. Okay, measuring how thick this wall is. And John. Don't lose count. And the angel. 35, 36. John. Don't lose count. And the angel. You've got someplace else to be. Oh wait. Okay, it's 72 yards thick. Okay, good. Got that done. Well, how long is the wall? Okay, we're going to measure the wall. 1, 2, 3. The Bible says it's 1,200 stadia long. Well, if you follow the footnote, that's almost 2.5 million yards long. Okay, don't lose count, angel. Please count. How wide is it? Oh, okay, do that now. Same amount. 2.5 million yards long. Why? How tall is it? 2.5 million yards tall. So the angel's doing all this measuring. John is just watching. But it's a perfect cube. It's a solid place. You can measure if you want to take the time, but the angel's already done. You can do it with a yardstick. It's got stones. It's got pearls. It's got jewels. It's got glorious, wonderful things. It's solid wall with these gates that are always open, 12 of them, 3 in each direction, so that people who need to come into heaven and are coming in because of the victory and the invitation of Jesus can come in at any time. They can come in at any time. It's a wonderful place. The gates of heaven have names of the founders of the tribes of Israel written on the top. Simeon, Reuben, Judah, Levi, Gad, Issachar, Asher, Dan. And by now already you're thinking, wait, who? I think I've heard of a couple of them. Judah, Levi, Gad. Isn't that the name of the guy who did the snowman? Oh, that was Joshua. What Who are these people? They're the fathers of the tribes of Israel. You know what we know about them? They were not great heroic people. They didn't die heroic deaths. They were not heroes of the faith. They were sinners. They were people. They struggled with their families. They had family problems. Their kids were stinkers. They were stinkers when they were kids. But 10 of them ganged up on one, the brother Joseph, the one with the amazing Technicolor dream cult, and they sold him into slavery in Egypt. Human trafficking. And their names are on the gates of heaven. You walk through the gate under the Asher gate. What did Asher do? I don't know. He wasn't a great hero. Jesus is the hero of the story, not Issachar, or Sin, or Levi. Jesus is the hero of the story. And the foundation stones, those precious jewels, each inscribed with the name of one of Jesus' disciples. Peter, Andrew, James, John, Nathaniel, James the Less, Simon the Zealot. And you're going, wait a minute, who are these guys now? Simon the Zealot? What's that mean? Simon the politically incorrect. Thomas the Doubter. James the Less. I don't know who these guys are. Matthew, yeah, we know him. He was a tax collector. You've got to remember that tax collectors and prostitutes were kind of lumped together in terms of what people thought. Sinners, people who had problems, James and John, who fought so much and had rage, anger issues that Jesus called them the sons of thunder. Peter, who couldn't keep his foot out of his mouth, who spoke before he thought, it seems like. The apostles. And their names are written on the foundation stones of heaven. They're not the big heroes. Jesus is the hero. I say it this way because there are a lot of people and a lot of cultures that have this notion that heaven is a place where you go because you won this victory. You know, it's a place of reward. You do something great and heroic and you get to go to heaven. Right? You win this big heroic battle. You know, if you're a Viking, you win this big heroic battle and you get to go to Valhalla. If you're a peasant, I don't know what you do. Right? Or there's certain segment, I guess, of the Islamic fundamentalism these days, and you've heard this, that if you do something really great, heroic in the name of Allah, and die in battle and take down a bunch of infidels with you, you get 72 virgins in paradise. Okay? If you don't die in battle and take these infidels with you, if you're just a peasant who dies in bed, I don't know what you get. But this is not what heaven is like. Their names are not up there because they won a victory. Their names are not on the stones because they won a victory. The names are there because Jesus has won the victory. And their names are there because they're invitations to you and me to say, you don't do anything heroic to get into heaven. You don't do anything magnificent to get into heaven. You don't do anything exceptional and newsworthy and all that to get to heaven. Their names are up there to say, just folks get in here. This is the gate where just folks come in. And all the gates have names like that on them. Jesus is the one who won the victory. Jesus is the one who paid the price. Jesus is the one who keeps the gates open all the time. Okay? It's not like there's an entrance for the heroes and then an entrance for the servants. All the entrances are servants' entrances. All the entrances are entrances for just folks. For you and me. It doesn't matter what we've done. Jesus is the one who keeps the gates open and opens them for us. And the whole idea of a wall is, oh my goodness, you know, the whole idea of a wall, in this life, we like to think of walls as protecting us. You know, they keep us safe. They keep us secure, you know. And so you have a gate in a wall that you can open and close if you need to keep you safe. But these walls have 3 gates on each side. You get 12 gates, and they're always open on the side. And I think Jesus does that so that he can just He can help us. He can tweak our idea of gates, of the wall. You know, we have this anxiety among us that we need to be safe. We need some kind of protection. But Jesus is always our protection. He's always been that way. He's always the one who said, who's given us this vision of a mighty fortress or mighty refuge, a strong refuge. But he tweaks that refuge by saying, even in heaven, we have him as our mighty refuge. But he tweaks that a little bit by saying, but the gates are always open. There's nothing that we need to be worried about. There's nothing that we need to be afraid about, because everything evil is either in the lake of fire or it's burning in the trash heap. And that's why the gates are open. There's nothing we need to be afraid about. But he gives us this little concession to our anxieties by saying, in the new heaven and the new earth, there'll still be a wall. Because Jesus has always been our protection, and he'll continue to be our refuge, our strength, and our protection in the place where we can feel safe, even in the new heaven and the new earth. A solemn place. And a glorious place. A place built on the foundation stones of all these gemstones, these precious stones, through which the light of God and the Lamb gets refracted and shining and so forth. God and the Lamb are the light of heaven. The light comes through them, and it turns out like Christmas lights. Okay? Christmas lights. Not white light. That's what people ask. So with the walls of heaven, it'll be all white, right? It'll be a white place, a beautiful white place. And, you know, they talk about, oh, people almost died, and they're going to the white light, and I want to say, oh, please, don't let heaven be a place of just white walls. Please don't let it be that way. I mean, I love the idea that God and the Lamb are the light of heaven. I love that. I love the idea that we don't need the sun and the moon to provide light. But I think the sun and the moon will still be there. I mean, they're part of this creation. And the sun and the moon are really cool. I hope that they'll be in the new creation. You know, just to be there. Because they're cool. And why shouldn't they be? St. Francis of Assisi called them brother, sun, and sister, moon. Why shouldn't our friends and relatives like the brother and sister, sun, and moon be there to help us celebrate God's new creation? But we don't need them for light. We have God and the Lamb to give us light. But I hope heaven isn't going to be just nothing but white walls. Have you ever been in a place where it's been nothing but white walls? I mean, have you walked the halls of Medina Hospital recently? Oh my gosh. I want color. Don't you? I want Christmas lights or something. Don't you? If you've been in a place or something with white walls? Oh my gosh, give us color, please. And so the city is built on these stones, sapphires, emeralds, rubies, all kinds of colors that the light can go through and bounce around. What a glorious, must be like a kaleidoscope, you know? Everywhere you turn, heaven is going to be that way. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be glorious. The light itself celebrating the presence of God, and we get to be there. What a wonderful place it's going to be. Just a place of continuous celebration. Jesus tells us this because he's pretty sure we need to know that about heaven. Not a dull place. Not a place where we're going to, that kind of stuff. Not a place of nothing. Listen, I'm going to tell you this. There's some people who think that this world is so bad, the best we can do is just get out of it and then there'll be nothing. They can't even think of a place of having anything better. They think the best we can do is get out of this and then that'll be the end. There'll be nothing. They're called Buddhists. That's what nirvana really is. You know, you've heard of nirvana, not the rock group, but the other place that Buddhists want to go to. Let's go to nirvana. It gets out of this world and gets us into a place where there's nothing. Well, baloney, I don't want that. I don't know if you do, but I don't want that. And Jesus knows we don't need that. We need a place of solid, a place of security, a place of promise, a place of gloriousness, a place of color, a place where God is there with Jesus and the Lamb, a place where we can be there because Jesus has given us the victory, shares it with us, a place that will be tasty. That's next week. A place where we get to be because we're just folks, and we get to come in through the entrances that say, just folks come in through here. That's the deal. Jesus has already done it for us. It's like this. In a couple of months, there'll be a thing called a Super Bowl. Let's imagine that Jesus goes out and buys every seat in the stadium where the Super Bowl is going to be held. Pays for every single one. And then he comes here and says, you are all my friends, you get a ticket. And you say, why do I get a ticket? It's because you're my friend. Well, what did I do to deserve this? You didn't do anything. I did it. I paid for it. I love you. You're my friend. You're my sister. You're my brother. You're my family. I love you. You get a ticket. Come to the Super Bowl with me. I paid for it. That's what heaven is like. Okay? We don't do anything heroic to get into heaven. Jesus has already done it. We don't do anything wonderful to get into heaven. Jesus has already done it. We don't do anything victorious or terrific to get it. Jesus has already done it. And all that happens with us is that we are his friends. We're his brothers, we're his sisters, we're his family. And Jesus comes to us and says, come with me and live here forever. In the resurrection, we get new glorious bodies. Everything is cleansed, everything is washed off. All the sins that we might have been trudging through in this life, all the mud that we might have picked up, all the dirt that we might have been picked up, it's all cleaned off, it's all gone, it's all washed away. We get to live there forever. And what Jesus says is, just come, please. And we come. And it'll be solid, and it'll be glorious, and it'll be tasty. But that's next week. So in the meantime, between now and next week, Thanksgiving is coming. So you have an opportunity to do this. You have an opportunity to taste as much as you can and smell as much as you can between this week and next week, and whatever Thanksgiving you're going to have, to enjoy it as much as possible, every single thing that you can. My assignment for you this coming week is to pig out. Enjoy yourself as much as possible, and then next week when we come, I'll be able to say, did you enjoy all of that? You ain't seen nothing yet. Amen.